Hello and welcome into Sports Talk on a Budget. It is Friday, January 6th, 2023. Yes, we're already into 2023. It's crazy that 2022 felt like it went really quick, but not really quick at the same time. But either way, obviously, still a lot of big sports topics. We got the national championship Monday night. We got the last week of the regular season for the NFL this weekend. So a lot to talk about. Also, some stuff that aren't so great to talk about as well. But let's go ahead and dive into the topics of the show. First topic of the day is going to be I'm going to break down the playoff clinching scenarios in both the AFC and NFC, not just division, but playoff to get into the playoffs, one seeds, seeding difference there. I'm going to break that down. Next thing will be my national championship preview. Obviously, we have TCU and Georgia. Break down that game, give you some of the keys I think in that game and who I think can ultimately obviously win that game as well. And then finally, just three topics for the show today. I will end the show with my Week 18 NFL picks. Let's go ahead and dive into the show. Now, before I get into any of the topics, I kind of just want to address what we saw Monday night. And obviously, that was with Demar Hamlin having the cardiac arrest after the hit by T. Higgins on the field. Just a scary situation there and something that you never really expect to see, you never really want to see on an NFL field. I've watched the NFL my entire life. I've seen guys being carted off for concussion-related issues, other injuries like ACL, Achilles injuries. Never seen anything like this. Now, I have seen other guys like Eric LeGrand for Rutgers, who was paralyzed about 9 years ago. We had the Ryan Shazier situation with the Steelers about 6-7 years ago as well. So I have seen those kind of situations, but never seen a situation where someone literally had to be resuscitated on the field. They had to administer CPR on Demar Hamlin. There was talks that they had to use the defibrillator to bring him back to life, basically. So just a scary situation there. And my heart and prayers go out to Demar Hamlin, his family, the Bills organization, the Bengals who were playing against him, T. Higgins who had that collision with him, and then he drops there right after. This is not on T. Higgins at all. That is a regular football play that happens, a ton of times throughout the game, so it's not on T. Higgins at all. But good news has come the last couple of days. Yesterday, he was able to kind of wake up and communicate. Supposedly, all his mental and cognitive faculties are all intact, which is great news there. And then today we get even better news. He's off of the breathing tube, breathing on his own. And not just that, he was also able to FaceTime the Buffalo Bills team and tell them that he loves them and talk to them. That is great news. It's only been 4 days basically since the injury on Monday night. So that's great news to get on this Friday. And I really think that's going to really help the Buffalo Bills this weekend as well. With that being said, like I said, prayers are still going out to the Bills organization, Demar Hamlin and his family, T. Higgins as well. Everybody involved, prayers are still going out to them from me as well. But let's go ahead and dive into the topics of the show. And as I mentioned, we are going to start with the AFC in the basically the NFL playoff clinching scenarios. Now, before I jump into the AFC, obviously the game on Monday night, the NFL came out yesterday and called it a no contest, so it's not going to be a tie, it's not going to be a loss. Both the Bengals and the Bills are going to play one less game than every other team in the NFL, and that obviously leads to clinching scenarios. I'll go over the top 3 clinching scenarios for the top 3 seeds in the AFC, and then go over what the NFL has discussed as possible scenarios if it gets further in the playoffs and these teams are still alive. So with that game being canceled and called a no contest, that moves the Kansas City Chiefs up into the 1 seed. And they have a chance to clinch the 1 seed. All they have to do is win against the Raiders on Saturday, and they will be the number 1 seed going into the playoffs. And then obviously that moves the Bills to the 2 seed. The Bills can clinch the 2 seed with the victory, can clinch the 1 seed with the victory against the Patriots on Sunday, and a loss for the Kansas City Chiefs on Saturday. So that's their scenarios there. And then we'll look at the Cincinnati Bengals, can clinch the 1 seed with both a Kansas City and Buffalo loss, can clinch the 2 seed with a Buffalo loss, and then obviously are pretty much locked into the 3 seed if they win and the other 2 teams win, or if they lose and the other 2 teams still lose or win, or whatever scenario happens there. But what has been discussed by the NFL, and is pretty much something that I think is going to happen, is what they reported is probably going to happen, that if the Bills and Chiefs meet in the AFC Championship game, that will most likely be played on a neutral site, since seeding was basically pretty much decided not on the field, was decided off the field with that scenario that happened to Demar Hamlin and the game being called a no contest. And then if the Chiefs lose to the Raiders and the Bengals beat the Ravens this weekend, and those 2 teams meet in the AFC Championship game, That will most likely be a neutral site game as well, since that would move the Bengals over the Chiefs because of the head-to-head, or that would have moved. That would keep the Chiefs, unfortunately, in front of the Bengals because they have more games. But if the Bengals would have played that extra game against the Bills and won, they would have been ahead of the Chiefs if the Chiefs would have lost. So if the Chiefs and Bengals meet in the AFC Championship game, that'll most likely be a neutral site, as well as the Bills and Bengals. If they meet in the AFC Championship game, that'll most likely be a neutral site. We move on to the 4th seed there, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And pretty much it's very easy for Jacksonville. They got a home game this weekend against the Tennessee Titans. If they win that game, they win the AFC South title, and they're in the playoffs. Simple as that. Win and in. You win the division. You're in the playoffs for the first time since 2018 when you went all the way to the AFC Championship game and lost to the Patriots. Very simple scenario there for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then we move to the 5 seed, and the 5 seed is currently the Chargers. And the Chargers are playing this weekend. They're on the road against the Denver Broncos. Now, if they win, they will hold on to that number 1 wild card spot in the 5 seed. If they lose, they would need the Ravens as well to lose to the Bengals to stay in that number 5 seed. However, if the Ravens win and the Chargers lose, the Chargers will move back to the 6th seed. Moving on to the Ravens. The Ravens, if the Bengals would have lost Monday night to the Bills, would have a chance to play for the division this weekend. Obviously, that's not going to be the case. The Bills basically clinched the division by having that game being decided as a no contest. So the Ravens can move to the 5 seed and the number 1 wild card spot with a win and a Chargers loss, basically locked into the 6th seed if they lose. However, if the Ravens beats the Bengals Sunday, Bengals would still have the division title. But if they're to match up again in the wild card round, there is going to be a potential coin flip for who gets home field advantage in that game. So if the Ravens win, they could also be hosting a wild card game against the Bengals if they were to match up in the wild card and the seedings match up that way. And then we'll move on to the 3 teams, actually technically 4 teams, but 3 teams that are alive for the wild card spot, for the 7th and final wild card spot. And we have the Patriots. The Patriots, very easy. Beat Buffalo and you're in. You get that 7th and final wild card spot. Move on to the Dolphins. They need to beat the Jets and have the Patriots lose to the Bills, and they'll be in. And then we have the Steelers, who are currently sitting in the 9th spot. They need to beat Cleveland, have the Dolphins lose to the Jets, and also have the Patriots lose to the Bills. And then final scenario would be for the Tennessee Titans. If they were to lose to the Jaguars and the Patriots, Dolphins, and Steelers all lose, the Titans would get that final spot. So that is very unlikely to have that happen, but that would happen if the Titans were to lose. They could still get in there and get that final spot if all the other 3 teams were to lose as well. I'm going to go ahead and give you my prediction on how I think it'll play out. I think the Chiefs beat the Raiders Saturday, and they get the number 1 seed. I think Buffalo is going to play with a lot of emotion, a lot of heart. That stadium is going to be on fire because of what happened to Demar Hamlin, and not just that, now that he is progressing and getting better. So I think the Bills win against the Patriots and get that number 2 seed, as much as that hurts me to say as a Patriots fan. Moving on, we have the Bengals. I think they beat the Ravens. I'll get more into that when I get into my picks and stay in the 3 seed there. I think the Jaguars beat the Titans. Like I said, I'll get more into that in my picks as well. We'll stay in the 4 seed. Chargers 5 seed, Ravens 6 seed, and with the Patriots losing to the Bills, I think the Dolphins will move into that 7th and final seed there. Let's move over to the NFC. In the NFC, it's kind of muddy as well at the top, as like it is in the AFC. You have the Eagles, who we thought was going to be the number 1 team for most of the year and has had 2 chances to lock up both the NFC East and the number 1 overall seed in the conference and has not done that. Obviously, Jalen Hurts went down a couple weeks ago, and Gardner Minshew has been the quarterback the past 2 weeks, and they are 0-2 in those games. But they still have a chance in both the division and the 1 seed. All they have to do is beat the Giants, and they'll get the number 1 seed in the conference, and they'll win the NFC East division as well. And then you move to the 2 seed. Eagles obviously could still get the 1 seed if the Cowboys and 49ers lose, if they lose as well. Move to the 2 seed, which is the 49ers. 49ers can get the number 1 seed if the Eagles lose and the 49ers win. If they lose, then they would need some help from Minnesota, but they're pretty much locked into that 2 seed if they win the game, and obviously if the Eagles win the game. If you look at the Vikings here, the Vikings could get up to the 2 seed, With a win and a 49ers loss to the Arizona Cardinals and the Vikings beat the Bears, they can move into the 2 seed. If they lose, they're pretty much locked into the 3 seed. They can't go down from there. 4 seed is currently the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who clinched the NFC South last weekend against the Carolina Panthers. They are locked into that spot. They can't go up. They can't go down since they're a division winner. They are locked into the number 4 spot. Number 5, we have the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys still have a chance at the division, still have an outside shot at the number 1 overall seed. So currently, right now, the scenario for them to win the division, they would have to beat the Commanders on Sunday and have the Eagles lose to the Giants on Sunday. To win and be the number 1 team in the conference, they would have to win against the Commanders, of course, have the Eagles lose against the Giants, and have the 49ers lose to the Arizona Cardinals. Then the Cowboys would move all the way from the 5th spot to the number 1 overall spot. If they lose, they're locked into the 5 seed. If the other 2 teams win, obviously they'll stay at the 5 seed. They pretty much can't go down. They can only go up at this point. Number 6 seed is the Giants, a lot like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are locked into that spot. They can't go up. They can't go down. They are going to be the 6th seed going into the playoffs is the New York Giants. And then there's 3 teams like in the AFC vying for the final spot, the 7th spot in the NFC and the wild card there in the playoffs. Right now, the team that controls their own destiny with the best chance to get in is the Packers. All they have to do is win against the Detroit Lions, and they're in. Next is the Seattle Seahawks. They have to beat the Rams at home and get a Green Bay loss to the Detroit Lions, and they are in. And then finally, the Lions have the least percentage there out of the 3 teams. They have to beat Green Bay on the road in Lambeau and have the Seattle Seahawks lose at home to the Rams, and then the Lions would get in. Like I did in the AFC, I'm going to go ahead and break down what I think is going to happen. I think the Eagles beat the Giants, and the Giants are locked into the 6th spot. I can see them resting some of their guys. So the Eagles will win the NFC East and get the number 1 overall seed. I think the 49ers just hammer the Cardinals and get that 2 seed. Vikings beat the Bears, stay in the 3 seed. Tampa Bay was locked into the 4 seed. Cowboys 5 seed. Giants 6 seed. And I think the Packers, I'll break this down a little bit more when I get to my picks, will get that 7th and final seed. So that'll be your NFL playoffs. Obviously, this could change. There's always chaos potential in the NFL, so we'll see if it changes. But that's what I see so far for the NFL playoffs, and that's kind of my prediction. With that being said, let's go ahead and move on to our second topic of the show, and that is going to be my national championship breakdown. So obviously, we have Georgia versus TCU, and Georgia's a pretty heavy favorite right now. They're a 12.5-point favorite going into this game. Obviously, for most of the season, going into the season, Georgia, the defending champions from last year, we pretty much thought that Georgia could get there. For most of the season, TCU, even though they went undefeated for most of the season all the way up until the Big 12 championship game, most people didn't think this was a possibility. They were a Cinderella story. They were a great story, but a lot of people thought, okay, well, when's the clock going to strike midnight on this team? When are they finally going to lose? When is somebody going to beat them? When they go up against Michigan, they're certainly not going to beat Michigan in the semifinal, and they do. Look back at that game, what an epic game that was. TCU jumped out to a big lead. Michigan came back, 40-plus points scored in the 3rd quarter, back and forth. TCU closes out the game at the end. Questionable targeting call to end the game there, but either way, they go ahead and they get that victory as well. So just to look ahead at that, let's see here. And that was a huge win for TCU. A huge win. They were big underdogs against the Michigan Wolverines, and they still come away victorious in that game. So great job by TCU getting past Michigan and getting into the national championship. Look at the other semifinal. We have Georgia versus Ohio State. Ohio State looked like the better team for basically 3.5 quarters in that game. Obviously losing Marvin Harrison Jr. There was question that was a targeting. I don't think that was a targeting there. It was close, bang, bang, but I don't think it was a targeting. Once he went out, the offense became more limited, and they had to settle for field goals in the red zone, and then Georgia started scoring touchdowns in the 4th quarter. Stetson Bennett with a great 4th quarter, so great job. Hats off to Georgia getting through that adversity there. They were down double digits in the 4th quarter, came back, won that game, showed their championship pedigree, and got back to the national championship. With that being said, let's go ahead and break down this national championship. Now, when you talk about Georgia and you talk about the Georgia football team, obviously, you always start pretty much with that defense. And that defense is very stout in the run. They're very good up front. But what you've seen, especially in the last 2 games, they can be very susceptible in the secondary and in the passing game. You can throw the ball against this Georgia defense. 350 passing yards last week for CJ Stroud. LSU threw for over 500 passing yards against this Georgia team in the SEC championship game. I understand some of that was in garbage time, but still, they were able to move the ball on them even early in that game. They just weren't able to finish drives in that game to keep it closer for longer against Georgia. So they are very susceptible in the secondary. Is going to be tough to run on them. Big question mark for TCU is Kendre Miller, their starting running back. Their running back that ran for over 1,300 yards this year. He is questionable. They're going to need him to be out there and be healthy to establish a running game against this Georgia defense, which is hard to do because this Georgia defense is very stout against the run. Like I said, they're susceptible in the passing game, but they're very stout against the run. So can this TCU offense, especially if they have Kendre Miller playing, can they get a run game established? I think they'll be able to throw the ball with Max Duggan, with Quentin Johnson, obviously a top 2 to 3 wide receiver in the NFL draft this year. I think they'll be able to throw the ball no problem. The running game will be huge if they're able to obviously have Kendre Miller. If they don't, Mercado is a capable back that is going to be able to have to carry the load for this TCU team to establish some kind of run, to stay some kind of balance in this game, because they're definitely going to need it in this game. Moving on, basically looking at another huge injury question mark for Georgia is Darnell Washington. Is Darnell Washington going to play? He's questionable. He's kind of that other tight end for them. Just monster, 6'7", 260, just a monster tight end. He's not as good as Brock Bowers, but he's a matchup nightmare. Got hurt pretty early on against Ohio State. Wasn't really a factor in this game. If they have him and Brock Bowers both out there and healthy, they are very hard to stop in that passing game. They're getting better at the wide receiver. They're getting healthier at the wide receiver position as well. So they're going to be able to move the ball. TCU's defense is a lot of like a bend, don't break defense. They give up a lot of yards, but they do kind of break down in the red zone and get stops. They're going to have to do that against this Georgia team. Because if this Georgia team is moving the ball and getting touchdowns against this TCU team, it's going to be very hard for TCU, because I don't know how well TCU is going to be able to move that ball against that Georgia defense. Like I said, they'll be able to throw the ball, but without Kendre Miller, are they going to be able to establish some kind of run game? So that is a big question mark there. Another thing is ball security. In the semifinal game for TCU against Michigan, Max Duggan had 2 interceptions. You cannot do that against this Georgia team. They will capitalize on those interceptions and finish those drives with their offense in the end zone. And if you're coming behind against this Georgia team, they are comfortable in that position. They like to play with the lead. They're going to pin their ears back and come after Max Duggan, and that is not what you want if you're the TCU Horned Frogs. So do not turn over the ball, whether that's fumbles, interceptions, whatever. Do not turn the ball over. If you start to turn the ball over like you did in the semifinal against Michigan, you have a chance to potentially get blown out in this game against Georgia. And then for me, I think Max Duggan has to have a Superman performance. He has to have a big performance. I'm talking 3+ touchdowns, 300+ yards, maybe 50+ yards on the ground, maybe a rushing touchdown. He has to have that kind of Herculean effort that we saw from him in the Big 12 championship game, that we saw from him against teams like Oklahoma State, against teams like Kansas State the first time around in the regular season. We're going to have to see that kind of Herculean Superman performance from Max Duggan, to me, to really give this TCU team a chance to win this game. With that all being said, I like Georgia to win this game, but I think TCU keeps it close for long enough to cover. So give me TCU plus 12.5, but Georgia to win outright. So TCU plus 12.5, Georgia to win outright. I think this is going to be a great game. I can't wait to watch it. I think TCU will keep this game close. Georgia pulls away late, wins by about 10 points. And then finally, let's go ahead and end this show with my NFL Week 18 picks. We're going to start off with the Saturday night game, and that is the AFC South showdown. The winner wins the AFC South, and that is the Tennessee Titans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are currently a 6.5-point favorite in this game. I like the Jaguars in this game. Tennessee has lost 5 games in a row, and they're just reeling. They have injuries at the quarterback position. It's going to be Josh Dobbs again, who's only been with the team for about 2.5 weeks. Derrick Henry is going to play, but he's not going to be 100%. And obviously, if you're the Tennessee Titans, you obviously need Derrick Henry at 100%. So that does not bode well for either the Tennessee Titans, especially on the offensive side. And this Jacksonville Jaguars team, they've been playing really well. Trevor Lawrence has been very good the last 6-7 weeks. Last week, they didn't even really need him to do that much. I know it was the Houston Texans, but Travis Etienne and that offense ran all over the Texans, and they didn't really need Trevor Lawrence to play that well because they were rushing the ball just that well. So they become a balanced team on offense. That defense is getting better and better. So I'm going to go ahead and roll with the Jacksonville Jaguars -6.5 to win at home Saturday night, win the AFC South, and punch their ticket to the playoffs. And then we'll move to a game that's on Sunday, and that is going to be the Ravens at the Bengals. And the Bengals are currently a 7-point favorite in this game. Still question marks if Lamar Jackson is going to play. I don't think he is. Tyler Huntley will probably be the quarterback. I think the Bengals are going to be hungry to play. Obviously, that game Monday night got canceled with the situation with Demar Hamlin. So they haven't really played a full game, obviously, in 2 weeks. And they want to make sure that they win that division with no doubt and don't have to go to a coin flip potentially in a wild card round against the Ravens if they happen to lose to them this weekend. So I like the Bengals to win at home, close out the season on a high note, still have an outside shot at a 2 or 1 seed. So they're still got a lot to play for if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. So give me the Bengals -7 in this game. And then we have the Giants at the Eagles, and the Eagles are currently a 14-point favorite. Now, Jalen Hurts is still questionable for this game, so it could still be Gardner Minshew, but I think it will be Jalen Hurts. The question mark for me is, do the Giants play their starters, and how long do they play their starters? How long do they play Saquon Barkley? How long do they play Daniel Jones? Some of the receivers, some of the defensive players, because they are locked in to the 6th seed in the NFC. I think there's a little bit of pride there. For the Giants, they got hammered by the Eagles at home about 3 weeks ago, so maybe a little bit of pride there. Eagles haven't locked up the division yet or the 1 seed, so if you're the Giants, you have a chance to play spoiler on this magical Eagles season, this magical Eagles regular season. I think that's a chance to play your starters for longer. 14-point spread's a big spread, especially with the question mark with Jalen Hurts. So I'm going to roll with the Giants +14 in this matchup. And then we'll go to the big game Sunday night. And that is the battle for the NFC North wildcard team. Obviously, the Minnesota Vikings already locked up the NFC North, but there's a chance for either one of these teams to get into the playoff. Right now, the Packers are 4.5-point favorite, so it's the Lions at the Packers. Packers are a 4.5-point favorite. The Lions are a good team this year. They've been playing well, but they're not the same team on the road, especially outdoors. And historically in his career, Jared Goff is not the same player outdoors either. So I don't love that kind of scenario for Jared Goff and for the Detroit Lions. And the Packers team was a team that most people left for dead about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and now they have an opportunity to get back into the playoffs. I think they relish that opportunity, win and cover at home. So go ahead and give me the Packers -4.5 in that game to win, get that 7th and final playoff spot, and move on to the playoffs. And then finally, we'll finish with a game with some playoff implications, but a team that needs some help, and that is going to be the Jets at the Dolphins, and the Dolphins are currently a 3-point favorite in this game. Now, this game might not be a very watchable game because it's most likely going to be Joe Flacco at quarterback versus Skylar Thompson because Tua is still injured for the Miami Dolphins, and we're not sure if Teddy Bridgewater is going to be able to go for the Dolphins either. So it may not be the most watchable game, but Dolphins still have an outside shot at the playoffs and need the Patriots to lose to the Bills so they can get in. You still got Tyreek Hill. You still got Jalen Waddle. You still got good running backs like Monster and Jeff Wilson. Just a better overall team in the Dolphins there. I think they win at home and still have a shot at the playoffs, so they're having a lot to play for. They win and cover, so go ahead and give me the Dolphins -3 in this matchup. That has been my show today. Thank you for watching and listening. You can always follow and listen to this podcast on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Buzzsprout, and other places where you can get your podcast. And if you want to watch the video version of this podcast, you can always watch it on YouTube as well, under Sports Talk on a Budget. And please go follow and like my social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, also under Sports Talk on a Budget as well. Thank you again for watching and listening, and have a great day.